All right, welcome back, you guys. So in this lecture, we're going to be covering topic 1.4, spatial concepts. All right. So to recap, topic 1.1 was looking at types of maps, right? Map projections, looking at the concepts that geographers use to analyze maps, right? Topics 1.2 and 1.3 we're looking at the geographic tools that geographers use and looking at qualitative and quantitative data, right? And the impact that has when studying geography, right? But now we're going to be looking at the more broad concepts that geographers use in their studies, right? So by the end of this section, you'll understand that geographers analyze relationships among and between places to reveal important spatial patterns, right? More specifically, the learning objective here should be that you'll be able to define major geographic concepts that illustrate spatial patterns. Okay. So again, geographers take the spatial approach, the spatial perspective, all right, just like a historian would take the historical perspective, all right? So geographers analyze processes and phenomena at different scales, right? Like global, regional, national, local, right? And they ask questions like, how do we describe where a place is? How do we describe what a location is like? Why are things where they are? How did things become distributed? And so on and so on, okay? The first concept we're going to be looking at is space, all right? So space is essentially the physical distance between two places on the Earth's surface. Thinking in terms of space, spatially means understanding the pattern and distribution of objects and analyzing the relationships, their connectedness, right? Movement, growth, change across time, right? When you think of space in geography, don't think of outer space, all right? But more specifically with space, right? Geographers like to hone in on the spatial interaction, right, between places, right? The contact, the movement, the flow of things between locations, whether that's physical or through information, right? And within space, there are a couple of sub-concepts we could say, right? One of them being connection, right? Looking at the relationship among people and objects across the barrier of space, right? We're looking at diffusion, the process by which a characteristic spreads across space from one place to another, right? And there are lots of types of diffusion, and we'll come back to this in later units, all right? But let's do the quick crash course on each type of diffusion, all right? So the first is relocation diffusion. The spread of an idea through physical movement from one place to another, right? So think Christianity, right, beginning in modern day Israel, spreading to Europe, right, to the Americas, to Africa. All right, expansion diffusion, the spread of a feature from one place to another in an additive process. All right, a couple of other diffusions here. Hierarchical diffusion, the spread of an idea from persons or nodes of authority, right, to other persons or places, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be from a person of authority, right? Could it be from the bottom up as well, right? So think fashion trends, right? With politicians, right, or musicians or people high up there that we like to think, right, the hold power, right? Types of dance, music. All right, there's contagious diffusion, the rapid, widespread diffusion of a characteristic throughout the population, right? So think of things going viral, right? I mean, usually contagious diffusion, right? Contagious, we think of like diseases, right? That's part of it. But it's also, trends like the dab, right? Or something like an internet challenge, like the Ice Bucket Challenge in 2014. I don't know if any of you remember that, right? Stimulus diffusion, the spread of an underlying principle even through a characteristic itself apparently fails to diffuse, right? So think of something like a vegetarian, right? Eating habits, right? Influencing restaurants to offer more vegetarian dishes, right? That's stimulus diffusion. All right, also related to space, but two concepts in their own, distribution and density. All right, so distribution, this concept is the way a phenomenon is spread out over an area, right? Some areas might have a cluster or a concentration of something, right? Something that geographers also look at when looking at a map, but not just a map, right? Here's an example for you, right? Two city blocks with the same density might have very different distributions. In one, people might be spread evenly throughout the block. The other could also be a large building where everyone lives and a large part where no one lives, right? There's density, the number of things, right, like people, animals, objects in a specific area, right? So densities are like, we often describe them as like high density or low density, All right, so if we think of population density, for example, Manila, Philippines has over 171,000 people per square mile. Compare that to a rural area, maybe in the United States, where 850 people are present per square mile. All right, and with density and with distribution, geographers could ask various questions. Right, if we're looking at density, one question might be, what conclusions can we draw about people's lives just based on population density? Right, and population density can vary even within like the same amount of area, right? So population density in a 10-acre city uh, block, I shouldn't say black, tall apartment buildings would be higher than that of a 10-acre block filled with single family homes, right? Something would be more, right, in a tall apartment, things would be more clustered, right? As opposed to being spread out, 10-acre block filled with single family homes, right? So here's a map of the world population density in 2000, right? As we can see here, high density in India, right? Low density across South America. All right. Another concept which also relates to space is that of flows or flow, right? For geographers to study how different places interact, they look at the flow of information, people, or goods from another place. All right, so just think of flows as literally like a flowing river, right? Ideas, people, objects moving across different places. In this case here, with this map, we see the flow of migration across continents, right? And again, flow is a continuous stream of people, goods, information, and the economic, social, political, and cultural aspects of society. Got a couple examples there. All right. And the fifth concept here, also relating to space, pattern, right? Pattern is how objects are arranged in a particular space, right? It could be a neat pattern, right? A geometric pattern, or a pattern that's more random, right? It's not discernible, right? So studying patterns of phenomena in space helps geographers understand different processes like urban settlement, the distribution of fast food restaurants, right? And they also give clues about the causes and effects of how things are distributed across space, right? So here's a visual, just a look at pattern, right? So we got a linear pattern of houses, right? Somewhere in England, maybe. Or we have square rectangular patterns, right? The Land Ordinance of 1785, for example, in the United States, right? Again, other patterns, right? This doesn't look linear, but linear pattern in the grand scheme of things, right? Circular patterns, right? So there are a bunch of different patterns. All right. Those first five concepts dealt with space. All right. Now we're going to deal with location and specifically place. All right. So this is kind of recapping 1.1, right? But it also deals, this concept could also deal with studies outside of maps, all right? Absolute and relative location. So absolute location, the precise location of something like latitude, longitude, street address, right? Relative location, again, is the location of something in relation to something, right? Helps us, using relative location helps us understand the significance of a place, right? So I'm trying to think here of an example, right? Like Oregon being next to the Pacific Ocean, right? Or Portland, right, being near the Willamette River, being close to the Columbia River, right? That says something about Portland. Right? Being next to the ocean says something about Oregon. And relative location is often described in terms of connectivity, right? How well two locations are tied together, and accessibility, right? How quickly and easily people in one location can interact with others, right? So, for example, Oregon is just south of Washington, right? That's relative location, right? That what does that tell us, right? We're somehow connected to Washington pretty well, all right? Because we're not that far, right? Relative locations can change over time. Think of towns, right, in the Wild West, right, in the 1800s, right? They used to be near railroads, but as different forms of transportation developed over time, right, especially in the 1950s with the suburbs, these ghost towns were eventually abandoned, right? So to think about relative location, I put a simple example for you, right? Starbucks is next to Kohl's, right, in Wood Village, right? What could that tell us? Maybe that people who go to Kohl's might go to Starbucks, right, for a quick break just to hang out and talk and get some coffee, right? So that's location. Um, Place is different though, all right, for human geographers, all right. Place refers to the specific human and physical characteristics of a location, right? The position and location, more specifically, is the position that something occupies on Earth's surface, right? Place looks at human and physical characteristics of a location. You could also think of place as an area bounded by human importance, a unique location, right? And we'll break it down. All right, so place has human physical characteristics, all right, but we could also think of place as in terms of emotion, right? One can have a sense of place about somewhere, right? Like the Moda Center, like what comes to mind when you think of the Moda Center, right? For me, I think of wrestling events, right? Because when wrestling comes to town, right, I go to the Moda Center, right? Sense of place, the exact definition here, factors that contribute to the uniqueness of a location, right? The impressions, feelings, and attitudes we have regarding specific locations. All right. When we think of place too, we could also think of the cultural landscape or the built environment, right? Interchangeable there. When we look at place, we look at the physical artifacts that humans created that make up the landscape, right? Human produced things, right? Like buildings, roads, signs, fences, right? And of course, right, not every place is the same, right? Styles vary upon places, right? Because of different cultures, right? Different physical landscapes. So that creates different um, cultural landscapes, right? If you look at Germany, for example, look at the town, a traditional town, right, compared to that of China, right, the built environments. All right, but with place, geographers mainly focus on two factors that influence how humans use a particular place, right? We've got site and situation, all right? So the site, site refers to a place's absolute location, all right? So think of site equals absolute location, all right? That and its physical characteristics. Things like soil type, climate, labor force, elevation, water sources, latitude, human structures, right? So if we're thinking of the site of New York, right, it's located in a large and deep water harbor next to the Atlantic Ocean. If we're thinking of Barcelona, the site is located on a plain with the Bessos River to the north, all right? That's different though than situation, all right? Situation refers to the location of a place relative to its surroundings and other places, right? The interrelatedness. So think of relative location, all right? Think of a place, its situation, right? The cities next to it, the towns, the mountains, the rivers, right? Communications like roads, right? Bridges. And situation ultimately is meant to describe a place's connection to other places, all right? Got a couple of examples for you, all right? We got to look at New Orleans, right? The situation of New Orleans is ideal for building a city, right? As the port at the mouth of the Mississippi River, New Orleans receives imports from Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa. So this makes it a good port city, right? If we're thinking of Fort Myers in Florida, if any of you have heard of that, right? The site, right? We think of its absolute location, physical characteristics, mostly at sea level, right? The climate's tropical, right? Water sources nearby. If we're looking at the situation of Fort Myers in Florida, though, right? It's on the Caloosahatchee River, right? I think I said that right. Near the Gulf of Mexico, just north of Naples, Florida, right? Because of the tropical climate and beautiful beaches, it's a tourist destination. All right. You could also think of Barcelona's situation, all right? I'll let you pause and read that if you wish to look at another example. Okay, so that's place. Another concept that geographers look at is distance, right? Distance, right? The definition on its own, a measurement of how far or near things are to one another, right? We could look at it through a type of measurement like meters, miles, kilometers. But we could also look at distance in terms of time, right? Relative distance, right? A place could be like 2-hour drive, right? Or a 10-minute walk, right? But understanding the concept of distance helps understand spatial interaction and the increasing connection between places, right? Again, geographers ask why, right? Spatial interaction. Uh, the first concept that relates to distance, at least for geographers, distance decay. So concept number 8 here, right? Distance decay is, it's pretty simple. I just have a lot here, but let's break it down, all right? The distance decay is essentially the farther away one place is from another, the less interaction those two places will have with one another, all right? So the farther away you are, the less interaction. The closer you are, the closer places are, the more spatial interaction there will be, right? More exchange of people, ideas, goods, right? I'll show you a chart in the next slide, but it's an inverse relationship, right? That's distance decay. Okay. Let me show you. All right. So here's the graph, the inverse relationship. As you can see here, the shorter the distance, the greater the interaction. The farther the distance, the lower the interaction. All right. Distance decay, though, or the friction of distance, you might hear it that way, is a lot less severe today than it was in the past, mainly because of technology, the improvement in the last 130 years, right? Airplanes, telephones, the internet. It allows for faster, easier connections between places. All right. So improvements in transportation, communication, and infrastructure have reduced the friction of distance. All right. And it's increased the time-space compression, which is the next concept. All right. Oh, by the way, here's another graph here that helps you visualize distance decay. All right. Cool. So because distance decay is less severe, this is increased time-space compression. And time-space compression is basically the reduction of time it takes for something to get from one place to another, all right? The shrinking time distance, so to speak, right? The relative distance between locations has happened because of improved methods of transportation and communication, all right? Like in the past, traveling from London to New York City or vice versa, right through the ocean would take quite a while. All right, but now with air travel being improved, right, and all the safety features now, what it takes about 5 hours. All right, here's an example for you. Right, in 1817, a freight shipment from Cincinnati to New York City took 52 days. Today, by airplane, takes a few hours, right, maybe less. Right, digital information, it just takes seconds or less, right, with the phone. Right. So with time-space compression, the world feels smaller, more globalized, right? Back in the 1500s, 1600s, right? The world felt quite large. Now it feels like we're a click of a button away. I mean, technically, we are a click of a button away from interacting with people. Okay. So that's all I have for you guys with topic 1.4, these concepts. If you have any questions about them, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to clarify anything. All right. You can also look back at the lecture, right? Anyways, the next lecture will be topic 1.5.